Jaws. Part 1. The Indianapolis Crucible. The USS Indianapolis did not sail. She sheared, a 9,800-ton scalpel of gray American steel, parting the Philippine Sea like flesh. In her belly, she carried the secret heart of a new and terrible god, a little boy, destined for Tinian. In her crew, she carried 1,195 men. Most were boys, their faces still soft with the memory of high school, their minds full of baseball, lukewarm beer, and the girls they swore they'd marry. They were a cross-section of a nation at war, a living, breathing tapestry of belief. And they were all sailing toward the anomaly. Young Quint, just 22, was our witness. He was not a man of faith. His God lived in the grain of a good piece of oak, in the sharp, clean smell of salt, and in the satisfying shing of his whetstone against his Ka bar. He was on the fantail, carving a shark's tooth, when Lieutenant Elias Thorne, the ship's navigator, stopped to observe him. Thorne was a man of pure, cold logic. His gods were the sextant, the compass, and the unblinking, mechanical tick of the chronometer. A primitive hobby, Quint, Thorne noted, his voice clipped. A talisman against the deep. A reminder, sir, Quint said, not looking up, that the deep has teeth. Thorne almost smiled. The deep is water, salinity, and pressure. Nothing more. All of it measurable. All of it bound by the laws of physics. He tapped his temple. The only gods are the ones up here. Quint watched him walk away. He had seen other men on the ship. He'd seen Seaman Davy Rosenthal, a skinny kid from Brooklyn, whispering the Shema before every meal, his faith a comforting, rhythmic armor. He knew Seaman Jim, Chief Blackwood, a quiet Navajo who spent his off hours just watching the water, as if it were a living thing he was trying to understand. And he'd shared smokes with steward's mate Ali Yusuf, a man whose every good morning and good night was followed by a soft inshallah, if God wills it. They were all there, a quartet of belief, held together by steel and a shared mission. Quint looked back at his shark tooth. We'll see, he muttered. The first torpedo hit at 014. It was not a sound. It was an erasure. 1 second, Lieutenant Thorne was on the bridge, confirming a star sight. The next, the world was fire, white-hot pain, and the shriek of a universe tearing itself apart. The second torpedo struck the bow, and the Indianapolis, that invincible blade of steel, was broken. She listed, mortally wounded, taking on water at a catastrophic rate. Quint was thrown from the deck. He hit the oily water and was plunged into a black, screaming chaos. The ship's death groan was the last thing he heard, a hollow metal bellow as she slid beneath the waves, bow first, a tomb for 300 men. Then, silence. The Indianapolis was gone in 12 minutes. The 895 survivors bobbed in a midnight ocean of oil, blood, and debris. The anomaly had its stage. Day 1, the faithful. By dawn, the horror had a name, alone. They were lost. The ship had gone down so fast, no SOS had been sent. They were just gone. Quint found himself clinging to a Kapok life ring, his knife still miraculously sheathed at his belt. He'd paddled toward a small, bobbing group, a human flotsam of about 20 men. Among them, he saw the faces. Thorne, the rationalist, was already trying to restore order. Listen to me. We are in a primary shipping lane. A PBY patrol will be along by 0800. The key is to conserve energy. No talking. Link arms to retain heat. Do not drink the seawater. Ali Yusuf, the steward, was tending to a man with a severe burn, tearing strips from his own shirt to fashion a crude bandage. It is God's will, he said, his voice firm, though his hands trembled. He will see us through this. Davy Rosenthal was pale, but he was leading a small, terrified group in a prayer of thanks. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe. Quint watched them. He also saw Jim Blackwood, floating a few yards away, separate from the group. He was on his back, his eyes closed, his lips moving, but not in a prayer Quint recognized. He was just floating. The sun rose. It was not a friend. It was a white-hot hammer. The day became an agony of thirst, of salt-caked lips, of oil burning their skin. But the men held. Their faith, in all its forms, was a raft. Then the first fin cut the water. Day 2, the cracks. It was a single tiger shark. It circled, bold and investigative. The men screamed. They kicked. Together. Thorn shouted. Hit the water. Created disturbance. The shark, undeterred, swam directly toward Blackwood. Quint watched, his knife in his hand. Blackwood didn't kick. He didn't scream. He just watched the fin, his body tensing, as if preparing to meet a fellow predator. The shark came within 10 feet, and turned. It ignored Blackwood and instead seized a young sailor, pulling him under in a red-pink foam. The screaming started and did not stop for an hour. Later, Quint paddled over to Blackwood. It let you go. It turned. Blackwood's eyes were clouded with a deep, profound confusion. He scooped up a handful of water, tasted it, and spat. It's wrong, he whispered, his voice raspy. The shark. The water. Blackwood looked at Quint. This is not the ocean. The spirits are not here. The water is sick. It smells like ozone. Like a dead battery. Quint felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the sea. The first law had broken. The faith in nature was the first to sense the corruption. By dusk, the sharks were no longer testing. They were feeding. The group of 20 was down to 15. Day 3, the absence of God. This was the day the anomaly bloomed. It began with Lieutenant Thorne. He had been tracking the sun's arc all day, a desperate, maddening calculus. Suddenly, he began to shake, a violent, rattling tremor. No, he whispered, staring at his wrist, where his chronometer had stopped, its hands frozen. No, no, no. He pointed a trembling finger at the sun, which was just beginning to dip toward the horizon. It's wrong. The sun is wrong. It's 10 degrees off. The laws are. He looked at Quint, his eyes wide with a new, intellectual terror. The machine is broken, Quint. The whole machine is broken. Quint felt it too, a nauseating lurch in his stomach, as if the entire world had just dropped an inch. The rationalist, his god of physics and time shattered, began to laugh, a high, thin shriek that was worse than the screaming. A few hours later, in the twilight, the sharks came in force. A man near Davy Rosenthal was hit, his body torn in half. Davy, in a paroxysm of terror and faith, began to shout the Shema. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is. A massive dorsal fin, larger than any Quint had ever seen, surfaced right in front of him. It was the Legion. It wasn't just a shark. It was wrong. The water bent around it, seeming to go still and glassy. Quint stared, and as Davy screamed, the shark's eye swiveled and looked at him. It was not a black, dead eye. It was a kaleidoscope, a multitude. Quint saw 1,000 screaming faces, fragmented and writhing, a universe of agony compressed into a single point. He heard it then, a thin, high-pitched screaming, not from the shark, but from inside his own skull. It was the absolute, profound, and terrifying opposite of one. Davy Rosenthal saw it, too. His prayer died. His faith in a unified, orderly God was refuted by a single, impossible glance. He put his hands over his face and began to sob, his faith broken. The fear, as you said, was taking life. The final breakdown came just before dawn. Ali Yusuf, who had held so strong, was holding the hand of a dying boy. The boy was whispering for his mother. It is all right, son, Ali said, his voice gentle. God is merciful. This is his plan. This is Kismet. The boy exhaled and was gone. Ali, following his faith, tried to close the boy's eyes. The boy's eyes snapped open again. Ali froze. He tried again. The eyelids fluttered and snapped open. Quint, watching, felt it. The air changed. The very pressure of anything vanished. It was not a storm. It was a vacuum. A cold, sterile nothing. The absence of God had arrived. Ali's prayer had hit a wall. He realized, with a soul-shattering terror, that this was not the will of God. This was a mistake, a glitch in creation, a place where divine will had simply ceased. He let go of the boy's hand and floated, hollow. The quartet of failing faiths was complete. The anomaly was now in full control. Day 4, the birth of the Legion. The men were no longer men. They were just pieces. Thorne was babbling about impossible stars. Davy was silent. Ali stared at nothing. Blackwood chanted a low, dead song. And the Legion shark began to feed. It was no longer just eating. It was depositing. A man near Quint was taken. Quint didn't just see him pulled under. He saw it, a heat haze, in the cold water, a ripple of energy, of pure, distilled terror, flow from the dying man and into the great white. The shark changed. It swelled, its flesh seeming to stretch. A stray piece of shrapnel from a life ring hit its flank. The wound did not bleed. It sealed. And as it sealed, Quint saw a cluster of tiny, screaming mouths knit the flesh together before vanishing. Fear, Quint whispered, has taken life. The Legion, now fully formed from the 579 souls, turned its attention. It ignored the babbling thorn. It ignored the catatonic Davy. It swam past the other living men. It swam directly to Quint. He was the survivor, the one who saw, the witness, the loose thread. It did not attack. It circled him, close enough to touch. It was a 30-foot walking, swimming, living, absence of God. Then, it stopped. It looked at him, and Quint saw the quartet in its eye. He saw Thorn, babbling about impossible stars. He saw Rosenthal, frozen in a silent scream. He saw Blackwood, pointing at the sick water. He saw Allie, staring into the nothing. The shark was inviting him. It was a black hole of memory, and its gravity was pulling on his soul. No, Quint whispered, gripping his knife. Not yet, you bastard. The shark submerged, but it did not leave. Quint could feel it, circling deep beneath him. A patient, metaphysical magnet. Day 5, the anchor. The plane was a miracle. A PBY Catalina, dropping from the sun like an angel from a book Quint had never read. It was from outside, from the real world. As the raft was dropped, as men wept and screamed with a new, hopeful hysteria, Quint looked down one last time. The Legion was there. It was watching him go. It was not angry. It was not frustrated. It was patient. Quint was pulled from the water, his skin blistered and raw, his mind burned by an impossible truth. He was one of the 316 survivors. But he was the only one who had truly seen. He was the witness. He was the one who got away. He was the loose thread. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him more than the 5 days in the water, that the anomaly, the walking, swimming scar of 579 broken souls, would never, ever stop hunting him until it could collect the set. He was safe. He was alive. And he was the anchor for the horror that was to come.